compared to the work at Amazon and Meta and Walmart, what's unique about the data work and challenges today at Adobe Stock?
Adobe Stock is a creative marketplace within Adobe's portfolio of products. We think about how to connect creative people with opportunities where they can make money off their work. The effort that has been in the forefront of everyone on my team has been decluttering these data assets, thinking about how we can simplify the data lineage, how we can abstract away the business logic from the aggregations that the data goes through, and also adding a layer of a semantic model on top of it, so that we don't need to mix everything up.
Did you need to have any architectural or foundational changes or specific components that you needed to build in order to make all of this more actionable or actually feasible?
The top of mind for my team and how we think about the team has been obviously jumping in the cart that everyone's getting into the AI revolution. As we're making progress in this area, we're already starting to see how we need layers of observability and kind of tooling on top of this to make sure this happens. We're still running a parallel process along with not touching any of the things that are already working for us. So we are still, you could say, in the proof of concept stage.
Hey everyone, and thanks for listening to another episode of Data Innovators. Today I'm speaking with Rohit Sivaprasad, the head of data science and engineering at Adobe Stock. Rohit, glad to have you joining us today.
Thank you, Roy. It's my pleasure to be here.
You had a great journey, and really excited to have you talk a little bit more about it today. So let's just jump in. In the past decade, you've been part of some very innovative teams, starting at AWS and all the way down to leading data science and engineering today at Adobe. We'd love to hear a little bit about your journey and your mentorship of early career folks today.
Absolutely. Yeah, I think I've been very fortunate to be a part of various different teams in companies of different sizes in different domains. I started out obviously at Amazon as a data scientist in the network capacity org, and then moved on to a couple of startups, and then Meta, doing usability analytics. So thinking about how easy it is for billions of people to use the Facebook app. And then after that, I spent some time at Walmart thinking about search analytics, search marketing analytics. And then now at Adobe, I lead a team of analysts, data scientists, and data engineers. Adobe Stock is a creative marketplace within Adobe's portfolio of products. We think about how to connect creative people with opportunities where they can make money off their work. Yeah, I mean, I've also been doing a lot of mentoring recently to think about what advice could have helped me earlier on in my career.
Love it. Always good to kind of pay forward, and especially in these times in the market where folks continuously kind of evolve careers and change careers. I think that's or fields, I would say. Always good to have leaders kind of reflect back and help a little bit folks that are in the earlier stages of their career.
Exactly.
So you mentioned kind of the journey and transitions in your career so far. So compared to the work at Amazon and Meta and Walmart, what's unique about the data work and challenges today at Adobe Stock? From an analytical perspective, architectural perspective, maybe even user or business perspective.
Absolutely, yeah. I think when you think about huge data sets, in fact, the data sets I've worked with at Adobe, much smaller compared to obviously AWS, which has one of the biggest computer networks in the world. And Meta has the one of the apps with the biggest active users. I think the last time I heard it's more than half the population of the world uses Facebook and its products. Yeah, I mean, I think the complexity at Adobe is not just looking at the size of the data, but thinking about how do we translate complex business logic that combines B2B and B2C, a subscription business model and a ecommerce business model. How do we put all that together and still be able to do analytics on top of it? That's been the the complexity here. And my team has spent a lot of effort in thinking about data modeling, all these different concepts and business processes into a form that's usable and helps us like move faster with producing insights for the org.
So from a data perspective, can you share a little bit what are the top use cases that you guys as data team produce or support from a business perspective?
Yeah, so as a team that supports like Adobe Stock, which is a business unit, we interact with like almost all functions that are like we interact with product managers, marketing, engineering, and also finance. A few of the kind of ways we think about what our like places, what our scope is, what our deliverables are, is thinking about how can we take data in the form that it is and see how we can deliver insights for decision making purposes and for like thinking about intelligence in terms of like content or customers. It is about like providing the visibility for stakeholders and leadership to operate and to run the business.
Got it. Makes a lot of sense. And you know, in the kind of pre-show, you also mentioned that one of your biggest first initiatives was a strategic transformation centered around data democratization and increasing velocity. Can you share a little bit more about that and kind of what was the challenge? How did you approach it?
Yeah, so when I joined the team, my mandate was very clear. How do we take a team that's been like building data models and business logic in this like data warehouse that's over like 8 years old, and how do we make it more usable for analysts and data scientists to move faster with the pace of the business? I think one of uh, like the observations I've made here and in other companies is like when data models are built organically, like it just becomes heavy and like kind of gets in our own way. So one of my main like kind of objectives has been to think about like self-service and democratization of data and how do we enable that. For that, like the effort that has been like in the forefront of everyone on my team has been like decluttering these like data assets, thinking about how we can simplify the data lineage, how we can abstract away the business logic from the aggregations that the data goes through, and also adding a layer of like a semantic model on top of it, so that we don't need to like mix everything up. So that's been getting a lot of buy-in, and like it's landing some very promising like early wins. And especially in the time of like LLMs and AI, everyone's now talking about how semantic layers are almost essential for agents to operate on our data. So it all feels like it's aligned at the right time.
Yeah, amazing. Wow, we touched on so many kind of good points. First of all, I love the point about quick wins, regardless of data or any other. I think any big corporate initiative, you need to show some wins early on if you want to get some momentum and buy-in. Otherwise, you're doomed to just be this kind of continuous initiative that kind of gets second priority for everyone. So love that. Kudos to you. You know, you mentioned kind of the decluttering of the warehouse. Can you share a little bit kind of what was the approach in terms of how did you even identify the inventory? How do you then identify what's being used versus not? How do you align like what's duplicate versus inefficient? How do you decide eventually kind of what you prioritize and keep?
I don't know if I have a um, like the perfect answer to that. It is a learning process that we are going
Of
through.
course.
We are still on the journey. But one thing that I took away from my time at Meta, being a part of the data engineering org there, was just thinking about like including and setting up these processes that also look at like intentionally, like, hey, what are the data assets that we have? How are we using it? Um, uh, how can we make them more efficient, or should we deprecate them, is like almost very essential part of like an analytics team's like life cycle, in my opinion. I like to explain it to my team in this concept of mise en place, like which is from the culinary industry. Like chefs like are known to insist that they do all the cutting, chopping, like before they start cooking and like cleaning up the counter. I like to imagine thinking about like an analytics team as a high performing kind of like team of chefs in a kitchen. The idea isn't to start cutting and chopping like when an order comes in. I think like by the time a business leader or a stakeholder asks us a question, like we should think about how we are setting up our like workspace and how we are setting up our data warehouse in order to be able to like serve that request fast. So yeah, I mean, to get into a little bit of specifics, there are a few things that we are doing. Like one is like thinking about like usage stats for all the tables in our Databricks workspace. Um, uh, we recently migrated to Unity Catalog. It's been great, and it gives us a lot of visibility into how things are being used. On top of that, like there's also an idea of like taking one like foundational table and see everything that's grown out of that, and seeing if we can kind of like merge few of those data sets together or like clean up the data lineage. There's also this concept of like pausing and identifying where business logic and assumptions are being made in the code for the pipelines. That's been a really satisfying kind of like part of this puzzle. I think a lot of times when data science thinks about a problem or financial analysts think about a problem, they clearly identify where the assumptions are and like what that leads to downstream. But in data engineering, we don't think about like where we are baking in assumptions in our code. Like so, that's been something that has gotten a lot of people on my team excited about.
Fully agree there. And I think that it sounds like you need a strong foundation, right, in order to both identify the inventory, identify usage patterns, identify, you mentioned kind of lineage, I think a couple of times. Having the foundation to do that probably very important, especially as you transition from an older system into a more modern one. And fully agree on it's always a journey, right? It never ends, and it's continuous evolution. Sound like so. If you kind of think a little bit forward, coming into 2026, you lead a multidisciplinary kind of data group. What's top of mind? What are kind of key priorities for you guys?
Yeah, I think thinking about like the multidisciplinary aspect of my team. Just a kind of side note: when I was interviewing with Adobe, I was very clear that I wanted to lead a team with both data science and data engineering. I think
Mm-hmm.
there's a lot of value that comes from being close to each other. I think a, a lot of times I've seen this at much more bigger companies as well, where data engineers are sometimes like thought of as a rate limiting step, and data science or data analytics like throws SQL queries over the wall to data engineering, and like it has to be scheduled or put into pipelines, which I don't think is how data engineers should operate. They should be more like inclined towards learning about the business and like the business processes and how to encode all of that in data. Yeah, going into 2026, I think the top of mind for my team and how we think about the team has been like obviously jumping in the cart that everyone's getting into the AI revolution. We are like definitely thinking about like how to lean in like and go all in on these LLMs. Adobe as such has been like very receptive to the all the new technological advances being made in this area. We've been set up with like Cursor, Claude Code. Like there's an effort to have us try all these different like LLM tools. So as a consequence, even my team, like even though analytics is not the main target for all of these tools, like we've been like trying to think about like how can we use like Cursor to build like pipelines and DBT models. We've been thinking about like how to use agents to do like very simple repeatable analyses. And for that, like it comes back to data engineering again, where data engineering has been thinking about how to set up the data warehouse that's more like agent friendly, which
Mm-hmm.
is like like cleaner data models, thinking about a semantic layer, and so on.
Well, that's super interesting. So you're talking about agentic data engineering and how agents can essentially help your team accelerate, increase volume, increase scale, get things faster. Um, typically what we see out there is that agentic, especially in the data engineering use cases, has two big, I would say, either reliabilities or potential pitfalls. One is context, and the other one is reliability, performance. I would love to hear your perspective. How are you guys approaching that? How do you make sure that you started kind of alluding to that? Like, how do you make sure that the agents have the right context that they need to produce what they need to produce, and also that they're doing it reliably and uh, optimally versus, just starting to increase inefficiencies and spend.
Yeah, I think the kind of like there's these two schools of thought that I'm seeing like emerging from all of this, like innovations being made in this space. I see people who are using agents to uh, kind of code and like produce output, and the other side are saying, hey, agents are just like helpers, assistants, where they kind of like give me direction or like give me ideas about how I can structure things, but not really produce the entire code. Or even if it does, like I'm going to verify it like it's an intern and kind of like make sure I'm completely on board with it before like pushing it up to the code base. Um, and I think like since it's so early on in the process, like we are treating it like the second example
Mhm.
that I mentioned.
So a
Um,
copilot type of.
exactly. Yeah. So it's not about like just saying, hey, like we need to do this analysis or answer this business question, like go build us a table, but instead like having it help us think through like how plan how we data model this like business question, like what would the tables that we need look like. Um, Here's a bunch of other tables that do similar things. Like, what do we need on top of that? Do we need to just like expand that schema to include some of these? So it's asking very specific kind of directional co-pilot like questions, and then like of course like documentation has been tremendously like solved by agents. Like nobody wanted to like spend time on documentation. Now there's like clean documentation. The pull requests have a lot of like context that makes it easy for code reviews and so on. So it is like, how do we augment using agents rather than how do we code?
And how do you? So it sounds like you're not today. You're still in the co-pilot phase. Do you see a world where agents are doing some of those activities, maybe semi autonomously, maybe doing it all the way, but still require human review at the very, very last step, or even completely autonomously? And thinking both the analytics side, but also the pipeline building, pipeline operation, facing those reliability or performance issues themselves. How do you view that as the next evolution?
That's a very timely question. Like I've read three different points of view on this, like on LinkedIn just yesterday. So it is like a very hotly debated topic. I'm very optimistic about like how we can kind of like train these models and use these models to automate a lot of these like tasks that we do. And so I do think there is a future where like a lot of pipeline building is also done by agents. We are currently working on, and I know a lot of people who are working on thinking through how do we set it up so that we are enabling the agents to do some of these more chunkier tasks. And so at least on my side, like we've been thinking about like moving to DBT from like legacy pipelines to have a chance to kind of like redesign the data model, and also like to have another shot at like thinking about like clean code and setting things up in a clean way. um and like it's exciting. it's very timely too because of metric flow being open source like just this week. That also fits into how we are thinking about these efforts to enable agents to become more autonomous.
Did you need to have any architectural or foundational changes or specific components that you needed to build in order to make all of this more actionable or actually feasible? Because again, we see today how, first of all, to get it to production is a big hurdle for many teams, and of course, then making it actual make it work and have a positive ROI. That's a completely different thing. I think we all saw the MIT report where 95 AI projects end up failing. So, what kind of main changes did you guys have to make or build to make it positive?
As we're making progress in this area, like we're already starting to see how we need layers of like observability and like kind of tooling on top of this to make sure this happens. We're still like running a parallel process along with like not touching any of the things that are already working for us. So we are still, you could say, in the proof of concept stage, but a little more than proof of concept because there is buy-in from leadership and my manager. Yeah, we are open to thinking about like what is necessary to layer on top of this to make it more production ready for us.
So you're essentially building kind of parallel stacks to the current one where the sport says is a new one for the agentic purposes.
Yeah.
Interesting, especially as you kind of continue to think later on about management and operation of both of those and maintenance. I think that's always interesting how do you keep those parallel, and obviously I would assume at some point they'll have to converge back together, right?
Exactly. Yeah, I think I completely see how like this almost reminds me of like XKCDs. Like, oh, there are too many standards, so we need another standard to kind of like replace them all, and then like it just ends up having another 11th standard. But the idea is like taking legacy kind of like pipelines and fixing things in between, like has almost like been more work and kind of like more riskier than starting something on the side that can kind of like reach a benchmark, a baseline before we deprecate the old assets. So that's the reason why we are doing a parallel track in order to test these out and see how it works out for us.
In your vision, right? The years, maybe 3-4 years down the line, what's the value? What does it unlock for again having those agentic use cases? What value does it bring to your team and to the org in general?
Yeah, I think of data teams like building on top of this like hierarchy of needs, kind of a meme that you might have seen. I think as we automate and like kind of productionalize like these lower levels of thinking about like data models, thinking about like infrastructure, we start like being able to get more involved with product and how we think about how businesses are run. In the future, I think it's most valuable for data folks also to be able to like sit in at the table and kind of understand a little bit more about business and how like the foundation of data that they've created like can apply, can answer questions, can produce insights. So I think of this like kind of evolution as taking us closer to being business leaders, thinking more deeply about the business.
Agents will help data teams get closer to the business, understand the business better, and assume that at the end of the day produce more value or faster at higher scale. So absolutely.
Exactly.
Let's maybe question on that because you touched on a couple of very big initiatives, again, maybe optimizations, redundancies, and also building new foundational kind of AI use cases from an organizational perspective. And you've seen it at different organizations, right? What's the hardest part about getting organizational and leadership buy-in for some of those foundational work? Don't always directly shape user-facing features or something tangible that the business can use or see. How do you get the buy-in from leadership or from the organization for some of those foundational work that's Again, not necessarily top priority or top roadmap initiative for the business?
No, that's a fantastic question, and it's something that I've seen like data engineering teams stumble over like at every single company I've been at. It's almost a meme to the extent that like we can ask for headcount for data science or data analytics. Like it's much more likely and easier to get approved than for data engineering. I think it's partially because I mean, data engineering is further away from the kind of decision making layer. And also, I think sometimes we tend to focus and on the engineering metrics more than the business metrics. It's a two pronged thing, which is it is harder to connect, and it is like something that we think less about. So I do think there is a lot of thought being put in like data engineering orgs thinking about like how do we kind of express like measure impact of data engineering initiatives. Um,
Mhm.
but if we draw a dotted line to like thinking about buy-in and thinking about resourcing data engineering teams, it is at the moment definitely like something that has to come from the top. I've been super lucky that my manager can see the importance of a clean data layer, and has been a champion for thinking about like not just like quality and reliability of data, but also like usability of data, like for the analysts and for self-service and democratization. Yeah, I mean, like my manager has had all a lot of these conversations to make sure we are adequately staffed in the data engineering space. But in parallel, I've also talked to a lot of people in the industry who do believe this like buy-in is something almost impossible to rationalize to leadership if like trying to connect data engineering and how important it is for like the foundational data sets and like not having tech debt. It's a very hard like kind of battle if leadership isn't open to thinking about it that way.
Definitely. Yeah, I think to your point, like making it transparent in the business words and how applicable it is for them, or what it enables or unlocks, I think is the key. So I agree with you on that. Maybe changing gear here. I know a topic that's very close to your heart. I want to touch a little bit on data talent. As you continue to build your team, again, multidisciplinary team, how do you think about data talent? How do you maybe one attract good talent in a very noisy environment and a very hot space today? And how do then you then continue to maintain and develop them as they are on your team?
Thinking about the job market and hiring, this is a theme that I talk a lot about on social media, which is translating the work that we do into resumes are really hard. But just to give you another side of the same problem, which is like as hiring managers, like translating what's on the resume to like reverse translating it back into what work they might have done is also like a hard problem to solve. I think like as someone who hires people, I've been thinking a lot about like uh, domain expertise in like analytics functions, like whether you're a data engineer or a data scientist. Like have you seen data that comes out of like business models similar to the hiring team's business models before? Have you seen like the scale that looks similar to the team you're interviewing with before? I think those are kind of table stakes in how I think about hiring. There is a lot of like lived experiences that goes into thinking about how data translates to value in these businesses, and I think like having exposure to some of that is like really valuable to bring into your next team. And on the other side, like I think um, when thinking about hiring and like showing how like the cool stuff that my team is doing, there's also that problem, right? Like because of uh, like all these changes in the industry, I think it's harder for you to reach the candidates that you kind of are selling to. I do think like having myself like enter the process early on, like talk to candidates, like is the first or second step in trying to explain to them and communicate to them my vision for the team and like how we're thinking about the business has been really useful in getting people excited about the whole hiring process as such. A lot of times companies just throw a data challenge or a automated kind of like coding challenge in front of people before they even meet the first person, which I think like turns off like good candidates in the market. That's, I guess, one tip that I've been thinking more about recently.
Thanks for sharing that, Rohit. That's a great advice, and I know that's again a topic that's very close to your heart. So I appreciate that. Before we wrap up, if folks wanna follow you, your journey, potentially reach out for mentoring, where should they go?
Of course, yeah. I've been like a little more active on LinkedIn recently, like just because um, like I'm trying to build community and find like more interesting data people, and like I want to connect with and hear about how all people like across the industry are using AI in their tooling and like in how they deliver analyses. So yeah, LinkedIn is a great place to connect with me. I'm always excited to talk to people.
Amazing, Rohit. Thanks again for sharing all of that and all the cool work that you guys are doing at Adobe Stock. Appreciate the time, learn a lot. So let's keep in touch, and thanks again.
Of course, thanks, Roy. Thanks for having me.